Hey, what's going on, guys? Biz here once again. So I'm trying something a little bit different this time. Basically, instead of like physically walking through a map as I start, I'm just playing some random VOD from well, my last stream session. So this is episode 2 of the Boneshatter, man. Like I said last time, I'd probably re-roll it, make some changes to the build. So that's what I've done. This is like, I don't know, what is City Square with 2 void zones, like a T14 or something. Basically, the character is comfortably farming T16 pluses at this point. Everything's super comfy, no real complaints with anything. The only one downside that I would say is simply harvest. T16 harvests are fine usually, but every once in a while, the blue harvest packs, if you get like 5 crushed claws with cancerous mods, which I feel like happens half the time now, it can get a little bit ridiculous, just because harvest was already ridiculous, and a lot of the Archnet mods like tend to brick melee, especially Boneshatter, since it relies on stunning. So they didn't actually take out stun immunity with the whole immunity removal patch. I have a video detailing my thoughts on Arch Nemesis so far, coming out probably tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. I'm not going to touch on that too much, just it is still a problem the build faces. It wasn't fixed by the last patch. Overall, the build's fine. I would say don't be too alarmed by the low HP you see here, even though I'm in high maps. I also, worth noting, you can see the gyms constantly leveling up. I just flipped my gyms here. Like, they are, like, literally level 5. So, this is, like, high reds with freshly flipped gyms. As you can see, it's not really much of an issue at all. So, aside from that, I would say probably don't worry too much about my life. Swap over now. So don't worry just too much about my life or anything like that. It's precise technique. It's kind of, I guess in a way, it's kind of like playing an Omni build. It feels weird to play in hardcore, I will say. Just like playing an Omni build feels weird, even when you're playing Champ Lightning Strike. Your tanky is, you know, I'll get out, but it just feels weird, you know, because like you have this preconceived notion of I need this much life, bare minimum. Like it kind of sets off like red flags in my head. But it's fine. I mean, basically the basis here, especially with this tree, you go for a lot more like life leech per second. So like basically anything that doesn't outright one-shot you just will never kill you, because you leech so much life per second, which is pretty neat. But we're level 93. We're about halfway through it. There were some cool things that happened. So I guess first, as usual, we'll go over the passive tree and things that have changed. So basically, and you don't have to start like this, I actually leveled as precise technique and never unspec'd it, but that is not at all necessary. I just did it because on the last Boneshatter guy, that's what I was farming, was a bunch of accuracy gear to go precise technique. And I just still had that in the stash, so I didn't need to farm it up again, because when that guy passed away in Harvest tragically to me reading Twitch chat, I was still spec'd into Resolute Technique. So basically everything on this tree, you can basically copy it 1 for 1 if you want to level and you don't have gear or anything. The only difference, is you will not take precise technique, and you will not take versatility. That's 3 passive points. 2 of them are going to go into Resolute Technique, and then do whatever you feel like with the last one. That's basically the only difference. Yeah. And then I would say if you don't need the spell sup that Entrench with the Mastery is going to give you, like if this won't cap your spell sup, don't even worry about pathing all the way over here yet. One other thing I should note is that running through Hematophagy, which is not what I was doing on the last one, doesn't give us any mana leech, which means you're going to need to get a jewel or get mana leech on one of your accessories. Now, what I was doing before was I just had 1 passive point in this minor node here for mana leech. Since I didn't have any real jewels rolled yet, that wouldn't have been basically just mana leech and no other beneficial stats. And considering every single socket that you see is bare minimum 2 passive points, it made more sense to just spend 1 passive point for mana leech. However, my most recent axe has mana leech on it, so for the time being, I don't have to worry about mana leech. It's solved by my equipment, but that may change again at some point. So what are the differences between this tree and the last one? Well, this tree, this build and what it's kind of aiming for is to be more boss friendly, and it never, I said in the last build diary that like I may end up going maces because I was following Karn's tree. I'm not going to go maces. I'm going to stay axes. I want to be able to boss. I want to be super comfortable bossing. So I'm going with this tree. And this tree, if you're curious what it is I'm more or less following Ben. You may know him as Darky. I'm following his POB that he had originally planned out for League Start, because he originally intended on League starting Boneshatter to do. So this is like his uber boss killing tree. Now it does use melding and it does use ashes. Unfortunately, you can't run melding until you get an ashes, but it's not that big of a deal anyway, because when you really boil it down, you kind of need perfect gear on this build to run a melding, simply because you need accuracy on like all your gear. You're going to need spell sup on all the major pieces of gear, which means effectively like all of your suffixes have to be perfect, because you're going to need a shit ton of LE res, obviously melding. You're going to need spell sup on everything, and you're going to need accuracy on everything. So like basically all your suffix rolls have to be perfect on every piece of gear. It needs to be exactly the affix you want, and it needs to be a high roll of that affix. So yeah, like to run melding, you're going to need really good gear. So by the time I get a ashes, you know, if I play this guy to like 98 plus, by the time I get a ashes to actually set up melding, hopefully I will have the gear for that. But yeah, it's going to be a contest on whether or not I can get the gear for the melding before I get the melding and the ashes, because I don't think I currently have a melding. I don't think I dropped one from any of my eater kills. Anyway, that aside, what other changes the passive tree? Basically grabbing max res here, nothing super like flashy. Most of this tree is exactly the same as last time. So I've pathed through on Destroyer and I've anointed kinetic impacts. Now you don't need to do this, but I anointed this originally because I wanted help with clearing. It's got 5% chance to deal double damage with 25% increased fizz, which is nice. It's whatever. I don't have the numbers on me right now. I haven't actually looked at a POB in a while, but it is a pretty decent damage increase. It's like a 8 or 9% roughly. And then 10% chance to double stun duration. When this procs, the same time your Ruthless procs, it is magnificent. You will notice, like, because you can see the shock waves on Boneshatter, right? Because what Ruthless does is every third attack basically does like a bunch of extra damage. And like when you hit that third hit of Ruthless and you hit them super hard, and then you also get the double stun duration, the shockwave is like, it's so big, it's very satisfying, and you know when it procs. I did actually get a bunch of golden oils. However, when I POB'd it out, Anointing Tenacity would actually be a damage loss for me and a very minor HP gain. And that's simply because on this tree, very similar to like an Omni tree, because you lose all your attributes. In this case, we just lose a lot of life. On this tree, we don't have a ton of increased life, so we're not really getting that much from Anointing Tenacity. I may in the endgame setup, if I end up not running a melding, because if you do run a melding, you need to anoint Sovereignty. But if I ended up not running a melding, I may do Tenacity for the endgame setup. But honestly, right now, Kinetic Impacts may look like it's going to run the whole distance. We'll have to see. Anyway, other than that, expecting to champion the cause, as you do, mana reservation, blah, blah, blah. So there's two things that I have here I'm going to go over. So Tribal Fury, right? There's a lot of things this gives you. So the first note here is just some melee damage. We don't really, I mean, that's cool, but that's not why you would path here, right? So we get 1 melee range here with some damage. We get 2 melee range here. And the last one is strike skills, hit an additional nearby enemy, with the mastery being, strike skills can do so from 30% further away. This looks, unless POB is messed up, this looks like a lot more on paper than what it realistically is, because Ben, for his actual bossing setup, spec'd out of this once he got the glove implicit from Exarch for +1 strike, which I still haven't gotten. It's so annoying. But he actually spec'd out of this, and I was like, wow, would that make it feel bad to play? Not because technically you're losing some extra theoretical clear speed from the additional strike, but losing the 2 strike range here, as well as the 30% range on the mastery. So unless POB is scuffed, when you plug this all in, it's only like a 2 radius change that you're losing it's 2 to 3 depending on, you know, how much strike range you have in other places. 2 to 3 radius, which is noticeable. Like it is like, okay, like it's the difference from like here to here. You know what I mean? Like it is like this, you would notice this sometimes, like this little distance, like I would say like a lily and a half maybe. Like you would notice that difference, but it's not like, is it 5 passive points level of difference? You know what I mean? Think of what else you can get on this build for 5 passive points. You can get a ton more damage. You can get a ton more life, survivability. Like there's a lot you could do with 5 passive points, and I feel like actually it may not be worth it. I will probably play around with this a little bit when I get +1 on the gloves and see if I can notice the difference, because every once in a while you do get a few stragglers, but for the most part, with just a +1 strike, you clear everything completely fine. I mean, you saw the VOD, and the character has actually grown substantially in strength since then. But yeah, you just kind of run in and everything explodes. You know what I mean? Like the +1 theoretically helps, but in terms of like actual gameplay, I don't know how much of a difference it will realistically make. I think at best, it will just kind of like shore up some of those awkward interactions you have sometimes with Boneshatter, where like you'll swing and the mob will like move just a little bit, and then you like miss that initial hit and you only hit like half the pack instead, because one of your +1 kind of misses a little bit, so you only get the shockwave from either your hit, or you only get the shockwave from the +1 hit and your hit didn't physically hit. If you've played it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't played it, you'll know what I'm talking about when you do play it. So I feel like in situations like that, it kind of like puts a fail proof in, where like the pack is going to be obliterated no matter if that interaction happens or not. But again, like I said, 5 passive points, I could do a lot with that. For general just mapping, it may not be a big deal, to be honest. You may just keep this until you start bossing more, but I don't know, we'll have to see. But right now, 5 passive points, especially with where my character's currently at and the fact that I don't have a 6 link. I think if I got +1 strike, I would just take my 5 points out of this and put it in other stuff. A little bit of damage, like maybe grabbing, cleaving, and survivability, right? So the next node, why am I spec'd into Steadfast? Well, simply because okay, so there's 2 things you can do here. You could spec into Rampart, or you can spec into Steadfast, and you need to be spec'd into one of these until you get a 6 link, because Fortify is your 6th link. You don't want it to be your 5th link, because if you drop like melee fizz or brutality, which are basically what you have to drop here, you don't want to drop close combat, it's too good. You don't want to drop ruthless because it's like core to Boneshatter, right? So you're basically dropping melee fizz or brutality, or if you're a psychopath, you can drop close combat, right? You lose so much damage. Like you lose a 20% more multi of damage by doing that, right? Whereas you can spend 3 to 4 passive points on the tree and be able to have that fortify, and still keep all of that damage that you would otherwise be giving up, right? So it's like a no-brainer to me. You keep fortify as your 6th link, and until you get your 6th link, you're either running Steadfast or Rampart. Now, why am I running Steadfast? Simply because Steadfast gives hits grant more fortification, which is noticeable in Harvest and things like this. What I've been doing is before Harvest, because you can't get Fortify in Harvest, right? But before I pop the Harvest, I'll pop a Writhing Jar and hit it, and I'll get max Fortify stacks, which lets me have max Fortify when the monsters all pop out, which is the rippiest part of it, right? So there's the increased fortification from that, and then this gives +4 to max fortification, which will basically cancel out the melee hits Fortify -3. So I have 21. Now, if you take Rampart instead, you will get more damage. And this is let me be clear, this is a lot of damage. This is 70% increased damage, which is a ton, especially for 3 passive points. Now, when you take the Mastery though, you lose 3 Fortify, and that has you at 17 Fortify. And now, in total, when you're looking at both of them, that's 4% damage mitigation that you're losing just off the top, 4% less damage from hits, which when you're at 20 trauma stacks and you're attacking at the speed of light, when you're at full rage, you pop Berserk, you pop Warbanner, you got your adrenaline going, your Ancestral Protector's up, that's buffing your attack speed, and you're at 20 Boneshatter stacks, and you're like, like your HP's like every time you hit, which is what the leech is for. It's why we have endurance charges, all of that stuff, right? We're also running a Poacher's Mark setup on this character, so we have frenzy charges on single target too, so we get a bunch more attack speed from that. It's just, I feel like that 4% extra mitigation is more important than getting the damage for me right now, especially with how low my life is. So currently my accuracy is at 5,700, which it should be a little bit higher because I just flipped gyms. So arrogance will get higher level and stuff like that, which will give me more aura effect. And just my accuracy should go up from my gyms leveling a little bit more. So my life right now is 5,100. I know it's reserved, but it's based on max life. So I have 5,100, which means I have 600 life of wiggle room that I could get, a little bit less than 600, that I could have that I don't, while still remaining, still sustaining precise technique. So yeah, I want more life. I need to get more life, and I'd rather just have that 4% damage mitt, right? Now, other changes that I should talk about. Basically, inexorable, this is really good. For those of you who don't know, this is a must take, by the way. This is a ton of armor. You really get as much armor as you can on this build, because once, especially when you're bossing, right? It's not that big of a deal while mapping, but when you're bossing and you're getting to very high trauma stacks, you are beating your own ass, okay? So like all the flat armor you can get, percent increase armor, just get armor and Physmit everywhere. Because when you're at really high stacks, you will be chunking the shit out of yourself. It is noticeable. Anyway, inexorable, why is this so good? This is 3 passive points for permanent endurance charge uptime. Why? Because when you hit with Boneshatter, you hit yourself, which means you can proc endurance charges from attacking. Oh, this doesn't refill anymore? What the hell? Okay, well, my writhing jar won't refill. My other flask will refill, but it won't. Okay, well, I was going to show you guys. I was going to spawn some rims and hit them. Anyway, so yeah, so every time you auto attack, you have a 25% chance to gain an endurance charge. It's really nice. So you basically permanently have that up all the time. So it's really important. Something that's really worth taking early on, I actually didn't have this spec until recently, but I just decided to grab more life instead, is the 50% increased stun threshold. That's really big. You're going to want stun threshold somewhere, because again, once you start getting to high trauma stacks, you're hitting yourself so hard that you actually can self-stun, funnily enough. So like when I was having the issue, I was noticing that I was stunning sometimes. I took the mastery. So far I haven't had the issue, so I've not been taking it. But if I start feeling like I'm getting stunned again, I'll take that passive point until I can get, you know, stuff elsewhere to help mitigate the issue. Anyway, moving on from there. I've taken Bastion Breaker, and this is cool. So Bastion Breaker is just Overwhelm, which is really good. And then with the mastery, you get 20% chance to impale. That's not a lot. Eventually what we're going to want is impale on the gloves, and also grabbing Harpooner, which will put us at like 70+%. But for mapping, this is enough, because with the Fizz mastery, you're getting 20% chance to impale. And then, funnily enough, I haven't clicked Impaler in literal years, ever since Ground Slam Impaler was a thing, but it actually has a use here, right? So while mapping, you run through, you hit a bunch of mobs, you have a 20% chance. One of those mobs is going to get hit with Impaler. Bam, you're now basically 5 impales, your max impale stacks, and it's on the whole pack. As soon as you click this, you will notice that your clear speed will go up. Like, the damage is very noticeable immediately, especially with the Arch and M mods. This also really helps for bosses. When you have very little impale chance, being able to just hit the boss once and get max impale stacks feels very good. It just leads to a lot more consistent damage. Like I said, end game, once we're a higher level and we get to take, you know, a bunch of passive points out of these nodes specifically, this is what, 9 passives. Once we get those points, we can afford to spec in a Harpooner, take points out of Impaler. We can actually change our tree drastically. We'll save a lot of passive points from not having a path through here at all, because we can just put 1 passive point down here instead. Yeah, but for now, this is kind of where we're locked in. And once a few pieces of the gear get solved, I will have a lot more passive points to play around with. But I believe that's everything on the passive tree. The only other thing is, like I kind of covered at the beginning of the video, pathing over for precise technique, taking entrench with the 10% chance to suppress mastery, and that puts me at exactly 98%. We're not spell capped, spell slot capped, I should say. However, basically the entire duration of mapping, I am, simply because of Quartz Flask giving 10%. Though by the time I'm bossing, I'm definitely 100% going to need to shore up that last 2%. That's everything with the passive tree though. Moving on from there, we will go over gear. So, as you guys know, the Boneshatter boy died. If you want to see how, just go watch the video. It's a few videos before this one. So the Boneshatter boy died, which means we are kind of starting from ground zero with gear. Sadly, we lost the like 750 PDPS Death Spot axe. We lost the GG helmet with tier 1 accuracy and the Boneshatter lab enchant. We lost some good pieces of gear. However, I have gotten some good pieces of gear. Now, I still don't have a 6th link, and that is ruining my life currently. However, I've done 3 or 4 chains that bind turn-ins at this point, and they were all okay. So I got 2 ES bases, 1 evasion base, and 1 base that I can't remember, but it definitely wasn't no armor or armor evasion. So currently chains that bind 3 or 4, me definitely 0. Okay. Which is sad. I have like constantly liquidated my jewelers into fusings, and I keep trying to go for 6 links on other bases, and I'm just not hitting it. It's a little bit sad, but I have dropped like literally 10 6 links so far this league. My like 6 link RNG has been crazy. For the first time ever, I 6 linked an item in 1 fusing. It was like 5 jewelers to get to 6 sockets and 1 fusing to 6 link it. And then obviously the character died to effigy, which you know, Chris Wilson giveth, he taketh away. But yeah, pain champing on the 6 link. But other than that, a lot of the gear has been pretty decent so far, I'd say. So we'll start with the best piece. I won't make you guys wait for it this time. So we have an axe here with tier 1 flat, we have flaring, and we have tyrannical. So we have tier 1 flat and tier 2% fizz, right? We also managed to get fizz leeches mana, which is good. It also max rolled. And then the suffixes are garbage. Okay, so I bench crafted on attack speed. However, sadly, this is potentially like the end game axe. Now with recombinators, we can make a better axe. So currently this axe is around like 750, 760 PDPS. However, the rolls on it are kind of bad. Actually, I'm wrong. This is like 780. But the rolls on it are kind of bad. The attack speed's low, and I'm missing 5 flat fizz on the top end. Which is a big deal. So this is, I believe, slightly over 800 PDPS with the prefixes actually in good order and the attack speed being max rolled. But every time I hit this through a harvest, 2 will max roll and 1 will bottom roll. You know, with the the reroll prefixes, reroll suffixes mods. 2 will max roll and 1 will like bottom roll, and then like my DPS tanks every time. So funnily enough, the original iteration was the best one. I got greedy and I wanted to get like an extra 2 flat fizz or something, and ever since then I've been trying to play catch up. But it is 28 qual, so everything there is good. I like realistically what I could do. There's a billion different ways to change this and try to make it even better than it is, but I don't know if I want to, because I kind of want to put most of my effort into recombinators to make like a GG weapon, because this is 800 PDPS. Any other league in HCSSF, you get an 800 PDPS axe, you're done. Good job. You fixed it, you're done. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Your weapon is solved. However, we're playing in Sentinel League, where 1,000 plus PDPS axes aren't that bad to get relative to the past, right? Like, we're living in like a Harvest-esque age right now, where you can create some crazy gear. And crafting fizz weapons is one of the funnest ways to like really take advantage of systems like that. Leagues where there's crazy crafting, playing melee builds and fizz builds tend to be at their most fun, because you get like so much of your damage is tied to your weapon that you can be an unethical beast, right? So this is gonna sustain me until I decide to go for the recombinators. I've been saving up all the weapon recombinators, but it's gonna require probably thousands literally of alteration orbs to get a successful axe that is better than this. So it is what it is. The end game axe for bossing, I want a death spot and not a ball axe because of the attack speed, allowing me to get to much higher trauma stacks more consistently. But this is good for now, and I would say that a ball axe is probably even better for just general mapping, because you're hitting so much harder on the first hit. It can be a lot easier to just straight one tap packs, and then, you know, stun, blah blah blah. Anyway, how did I get this? Well, I walked up to Rog and he had a Vol Axe, and he had like tier 4% fizz and tier 1 flat fizz, and then I bought it, and then I hit upgrade, and then it was tier 1, tier 2, and then I had an 800 PDPS axe. And if I sound like this was a very uninteresting whatever interaction, it's because it was. I walked up and I click, and then I ran out of affixes. I bought the weapon, and that's it. The only decision that I really made there was he offered to fill the suffixes or to re-roll the suffixes, and I didn't let him do it. I let him do it once, and then he offered to remove them all because they were all non-mods, and I did that. And then the last one to buy it was like a add suffixes, and I didn't do it because at the time I was using like a 380 PDPSX, 400 PDPSX or something. So this was like a double my damage. Okay, this was doubling my damage. And if he were to re-roll the suffixes and it fills all the suffix slots and they're non-mods, that means that I have to annul it because I don't have a keep prefix reforged suffix, right? So in that case, I have to annul it because I need the attack speed. And then I were to hit the flat fizz or the percent fizz, I would hate myself. So I decided to go with the safe play and just deal with bad suffixes that I can fix myself with a little bit of time and investment, right? So that's the axe out of the way. It's a pretty damn good one, but I want to try to get something better. Now moving on to the helmet. This is just kind of, you know, it's pretty decent, right? It's pretty decent. I would like something better. It's tier 2 life. We have an open prefix where we craft on +1 to socket at AoE gems and AoE. Why? Well, AoE is great, and +1 to socket at AoE gems. Believe it or not, auras have the AoE tag, so this is +1 to all of our auras that we have in our helmet. That's pride, you know, precision, all that stuff. So it's got cold, chaos, and tier 3 accuracy. So basically, I want this exact same helmet, but with tier 1 life and a higher tier of cold res, a higher tier of chaos res, and definitely a higher tier of accuracy. Basically, I want exactly this, just with higher tier, and I'd be happy. On the chest piece, this is nothing special. This is just spell sup, tier 3 spell sup, a really good cold and lightning res roll, a decent life roll, and an open prefix for a % max life. Benchcraft, this is kind of a whatever piece. It does help a lot with the resistances, but you can definitely make something a lot better than this. Onto the boots. These boots are both really good and really bad at the same time. So I rolled tier 1 flat life and I rolled tier 1 hybrid life, which resulted in 115 life shoes that also have tier 2 spell sup. So that part of them is amazing. They also had an open prefix, which allowed me to craft on move speed with chill immunity, which is really nice, especially in the current iteration of chill everywhere all the time. The only downside is that the one res roll I got on them, I'm lucky I got a res roll at all, but the one res roll that I got is so low. Like if this res roll was higher and these were higher tier, the character would be having a much easier time with resistances. But that's my only complaint. Again, this is like one of those things where it's like, I want this, but just slightly better, you know? There is still hope for this though. I can hit this with like an Eldritch Chaos Orb, or not an Eldritch Chaos Orb, but an Eldritch Exalted Orb, or an Augment, or a Leo Slam, or what have you. There's a million different things to do. And then hopefully hit a additional resistance roll on the boots. Now the gloves are both happy and very sad at the same time. I love the suffixes. Tier 2 spell sup, tier 3 accuracy, and tier 3 lightning res. However, you'll notice there's no life there. So originally they rolled with 5 life. And then after that, I had a Eldritch Chaos Orb and I hit it and I got 15 life. And then I got a Harvest, keep suffix, reroll prefix, and then I rerolled it and then I got flat lightning and nothing else. So I figured I would just take the increased damage here over like a life craft. Now, technically, I could just benchcraft life onto this, but I'm being stubborn about it. And because in the past, I couldn't put life on this, right? I got a 5 life roll and then a 15 life roll. So right now I could benchcraft on 70 life on this, which is probably what I should do. The benchcraft with the leeching is just like a holdover though from the previous iterations. However, this is again one of those things where it's like these gloves are perfect for everything I want. It's just I wish they were higher tiers, right? So I have been like all these things that I say that I like, but they need to be the same, but with higher tiers. I have been rolling them with harvests, like backup bases that are higher eye level, because you can see this is eye level 79, this is 80, this is 80, this is 82. So I've been rolling 85 bases because I haven't gotten 86 bases from Abyss yet. I am spec, but I just haven't seen an Abyss in years. I am spec for the +3 to item levels in Abyssal Depths node on the Atlas Pass 3. But yeah, same kind of idea here. I mean, if just one of these had one higher tier of spell sup, I wouldn't need to worry about it. There's a band-aid for now that I could put on that is spell sup on the gloves, but I would be giving up Impale for that. Because I'm pretty sure it's an Eater implicit. But yeah, I mean, same thing as before. I really need the lightning res on here. I like the accuracy, wish it was a little bit higher. Blah, 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 blah. Moving on to the belt. The belt's fine. The belt has a lot of room to improve, to be honest. I'm just using this belt because it's got an open suffix and it rolled a high chaos roll, right? That's really all I cared about because my character was like super negative on chaos res. Now you can see I am just on the cusp of cold, barely over on lightning and barely over on fire. So I'm right there on the line. I'm just over cap on everything. And then chaos res is at 37%, which is fine. But you can see, like, if I didn't have this belt, I would be pretty negative, right? So that's all I kind of wanted to solve with the belt. And then the murderous eye jewel that I'm running is just flat life with increased damage if killed recently for smoother mapping. Don't really need it. It's like noticeable on essences, I guess. It's just a mod that I have in while I wait to get the good one. And what is the good one? Well, I've been rolling murderous eye jewels to try to hit life with accuracy, and then anything else is a bonus. It is surprisingly hard to roll any amount of life with a decent tier of accuracy. I've noticed it's actually been quite a chore compared to how easy rolling jewels typically is with Harvest. Now moving on to the accessories, and these are very important for the build. Basically, you need, like I said, you need perfect affixes on everything for this build. You want a ton of res and accuracy, so your suffixes are filled, and then good prefixes. Now technically this is another thing that's pretty decent, and you would just try to reroll the prefixes until you get a good life roll naturally, and then you have open prefixes for Elrion Craft or you know, whatever you want to put on there. Same thing. This Sapphire Ring's pretty sad, but it's got tier 1 accuracy, which I desperately need, and tier 1 life. That's kind of all that it offers me. I had to open prefix for an Elrion Craft, which I need at least one of. Now moving on, Turquoise Amulet. Again, this is okay. I actually have a slightly better amulet that has tier 1 life and percent increased armor and things like that, but it doesn't have the chaos res. It also doesn't have that fizz to attacks. And this fizz to attacks is tier 1. So by replacing this amulet with the other amulet, not only would I be losing a fat chunk of chaos res, but I would also be losing like 8% overall damage. That's how much this flat fizz is giving me. So I feel pretty tied to this amulet right now. Hopefully I can get something better. Now, I have kind of bad news. Both of these rings are going to need to be replaced relatively soon in the immediate future for 2 reasons. I finally dropped my first Vermilion ring of the league. For some reason, I have like horrendously bad luck with Vermilion rings. They never drop for me ever. Like in the Fire Trap Elementalist build diary that I did at the end of my private league last league, the character was like 98 and hadn't dropped a Vermilion ring. Like yeah, really bad luck with Vermilion rings. But I finally got my first one of the league, and I've been trying to roll that for basically the same mods you see on these rings. But it's my only one. I want it to be good. I threw Catalyst on it. If I had Life Catalyst, I would have put that on it, but I didn't have them, so I put on Resist Catalyst instead to try to help with the resist issue. So that's where I'm at with that. I haven't had anything good yet, but one of these rings is going to have to go for the Vermilion, obviously, and the other one is actually going to have to go for an unset ring. Now, if you notice, there's one thing that my character is missing, and this is going to be very important for bossing, and you'll notice that I've kept an open hotkey for it. And if you've looked at a lot of my build diaries in the past, you know that I always put the same ability on my W key. That ability is always Flame Dash. Now, a lot of people like have, for like bossing and stuff, have been trying Ice Blink or Frost Blink. I can't remember the name of it. I'll try that on this character, and if I don't like it, I'll go back to Flame Dash. It doesn't really matter. But I need an unset ring to run that. There is nothing else I can get rid of to fit that in except for Maim. I could get rid of Maim on my totem setup and lose that 10% increase damage taken. which is a pretty decent hit to the DPS of the build. DPS is really nice for the build overall, but it's like, would I rather just like lose a little bit of res and have to roll an unset ring, or would I rather like lose a bunch of damage? You know what I mean? Like I feel like I just need to craft a good unset ring and I'll be happy with it. Funnily enough, Ben's POB, he's running 2 unset rings, which technically I will have to do if I end up going for a melding setup and I want to keep maim on my totems. So yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see on that, but currently that's where we're at. I'm trying to roll accessories so I can finally move on into other stuff. Have I done any like bosses on the build? No, I haven't, not really. I killed some conquerors, and that was mostly for favorite slots. Because I don't really want to do like some like end game bosses before I get at least the unset ring crafted for the dash. Because bossing, I hate bossing with leap slam. The way leap slam is coded feels like suicide. So like most of the time when I'm bossing, I'm just using dash abilities, which is typically flame dash. But yeah, I want to get my 6 link before I start really bossing. Bare minimum though, I need to get my glove implicit for +1 strike, because I need those passive points somewhere else to really boss. So things I would be comfortable, I'm pretty sure at my current gear level and stuff, even on the 5 link, I could kill Shaper, I could kill Elder, I could probably do Cirrus as well, no problem. But like, I probably wouldn't bring this guy into Maven without the 6 link, because again, it's not just the link of like gaining that 20% more damage multi, it's like all the passives that I would gain from not having to spec that. Like, just think about it. I mean, I'd be able to take out of this node, and that's cleaving. That's literally cleaving, which is, I mean, that's got to be like a 15% damage gain. At more than 10%, I would bet my life on. It's more than 10% damage increase for the build. So, yeah, there's a lot of like stuff really that probably needs to happen before I boss on it. And you know, it's Boneshatter, it maps fast, and it's, you know, it's melee in current patch. It does have really respectable numbers and stuff, but I don't want to like super rush the character, because I do have a tendency to like just boss rush all the time. I don't want to do that on this character. I want to make sure that he gets, he's comfortable while he's bossing, you know? I don't want to like grasp at straws and try to force it. Even though I think he's perfectly capable to do a lot of bosses in his current state, I don't think it would be super uncomfortable or anything, but I just don't see a reason really to force it right now. That's my current feeling. Now, how am I rolling my Flasks? Well, I'm using Writhing Jar now, so that's that. Now, my Jade Flask is rolled with maximum charges and increased armor during Flask effect. Worth noting that I have it used when charges reach full on all my Flasks now. I'll be honest, it took me a very, very long time to get used to this. But now that I am used to it, as soon as you can get this running on a build where all of your utility flasks are auto use, it makes the gameplay so much smoother. And I was a big holdout. I mean, tendinitis. I was a big holdout of just having control over my flasks. It made me really nervous to have my flasks auto using. And it was so hard when I first started doing it for months and months, like literal leagues, to break that muscle memory to just always 2, 3, 4, 5. Jump, 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 attack, 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 jump, 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 2, 3, 4, 5, jump, 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 attack, attack. Like it took a long time to break that muscle memory. But now that I have, the game feels a lot like so much smoother and so much more fun, honestly, to play once I get these on all my flasks. And it also is a huge boon for bossing. Why? Well, what you kind of want, this is masochist, it's not a flagellance, but you want gain charges when you're hit by an enemy, right? With good buffs on all of these. And then if you roll flagellance or masochist, which is like 6 and 7 charges respectively, if I remember correctly, you can basically, even while bossing, have uptime on your utility flask. And then whenever the boss hits you and you get those charges, it'll auto use and you'll just have it. And it's really nice. So you want to, like, end game flask crafting, you want to have 6 or 7 charge when hit by an enemy if you can. It's hard to get, but if you can get it, get it. And then increased armor during flask effect, increased attack speed during flask effect, you know, reduce effective curses, increase evasion, you know, what have you, whatever. But you want to have it rolled on every flask when you can. So that's the goal. I don't have it on everything right now. I have it on 2, and they're not super good rolls at that, but that's the goal. Anyway, increased armor, that's mandatory. Move speed, not mandatory, but I got the Masochist, so I'm using it anyway. Reduce effective shock, I would say probably mandatory. And then increased attack speed, which again, I would say is probably mandatory. It feels very, very good when that's up. It's very noticeable. Oh, that's the worst feeling in the world when sneezes slowly fade away. All right, and very lastly, I'm going to go over the links they have changed. So in the helmet, again, remember the helmet has +1 to socketed gems, so this does need to be in your helmet. Arrogance linked with precision, and then pride and determination. And then in our 5-link setup with Boneshatter, we have Boneshatter, close combat, ruthless, melee fizz, brutality, and our 6th link will eventually be fortify. Now, if you're curious what your 4 link's going to be, it's just this: Boneshatter, close combat, ruthless. That's your 3-link. Your 4-link, melee fizz. Your 5-link, brutality. Just like that. If you have like a really slow attack speed base for some reason, and you're just kind of like, it's like league starty type, and you don't have good gear, you're using a really slow axe, then don't use melee fizz, use brutality instead. But that's really the only change. Now in the boots, we have Ancestral War Chief, Ball Ancestral War Chief, Ancestral Protector, multiple totem support, and Maim. In the gloves, we're running Blood Rage, Berserk, Leap Slam linked with faster attacks. And in the axe, we have cast when damage taken with Ball Molten Shell, linked with increased duration, linked with Poacher's Mark. Then we have Ancestral Cry, War Banner on their Lonesome. Now here I'm going to explain something that is very different from the last iteration of the build. And I think it's so obvious when you really think about it, but this is what makes Ben so smart. He's using a max level cast when damage taken, which normally you see this and you're like, oh, what the fuck? Why? But look at this. It triggers when you take a total of 3,272 damage. When you're running through maps, especially while you're bossing, you're at like 5, 10, 15, 20 stacks of trauma. You are, like I said, you're chunking yourself insanely hard. Basically, what this amounts to is you effectively have the same amount of uptime on your cast when damage taken as you would even if you were running a lower level one. And because you're running a high level cast when damage taken, you can run a max level Molten Shell, which gives you absolutely insane Molten Shells. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Vol Molten Shell was nerfed a long time ago. It's not as good as normal Molten Shell. What makes Vol Molten Shell good is that you can preemptively use it, right? But you can see right here, 39% of damage from hits is taken from the buff before your life or energy shield, right? Whereas normal Molten Shell is 75% of damage taken from hits is taken from the buff for your life or energy shield. And the buff takes 20% of your armor up to a maximum of 10,000, right? And then your Vol Molten Shell is up to 30,000. Basically, being able to run a max level Molten Shell is going to give you a bunch more flat armor, as you can see, things like that. Like, my normal Molten Shell is like 8.59k right now. And obviously running it with increased duration, like, I am unkillable when Molten Shell is active. And if after Molten Shell falls off, I still feel like I'm in danger, stuff's not dead yet, that's super scary, I pop Vol Molten Shell. And it is so much stronger than the 110 setup. And because you're playing Boneshatter and you're self-harming all the time, in-game of course, it procs pretty much like normal. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. But for some reason, it just, no, it's not something you just think about. It's just, you know, I'm playing Molten Shell, I'm going to run the 110 or the 211 setup, and that's it, you know. But this, it's actually, it feels good. It does, it really feels good. And then lastly, Poacher's Mark. Why Poacher's Mark over Warlords? So what does Warlords really give you? You don't need the Endurance Charge generation from it. Basically, it will let you frivolously use Berserk while mapping, because you'll be getting Rage so much. However, you don't need it for bosses, because Maces kind of need it for bosses because they have no Rage generation, right? But Axes have Rage generation via the Axe Mastery. So for bossing, it kind of loses its only real upside. Other than, while bossing, technically you can be using Berserk more often, but you don't really use Berserk a lot while bossing unless there's about to be an invuln phase or something. But what does Poacher's Mark give you? Well, it gets extra flat life and mana on attacks, which we don't really care about. What we care about is you get like a baby vulnerability, -20 to fizz damage reduction. And then they also take a bunch of extra flat fizz every time you hit them, which is nice. Because your totems will also proc this as well. So if you have all your totems out there hitting away, they're taking a bunch of flat fizz from that as well. And then cursed enemies have a 5% chance to gain a frenzy charge on hit. So this gives you frenzy charge generation while bossing. So here's the thing though. This is 20% quality, 5%. This kind of relies pretty heavily on getting an Ashes of the Stars to really take advantage of it. Because once you have an Ashes of the Stars, the quality on Poacher's Mark is so high that it's like 12 or 13% per attack for frenzy charges, which especially when you have a death spot while you're bossing, basically you have 100% frenzy charge uptime no matter what. So what I'm kind of doing to mitigate this a little bit is all the jewels that I'm rolling for the build that I'll be using, I'm getting harvest implicits for frenzy charge duration, just to add a bit of a buffer there in case I go for a lot of hits without generating any frenzy charges. Is kind of a fail safe to make sure I sustain them, right? It's not necessary, but it's like a quality of life thing. And then obviously once I get to Ashes, it'll be smooth sailing. But that's everything explained there with that. And yeah, I think that's everything for the build diary. Closing thoughts right now. I'm having a blast. The build's super fun to play. Arch Nemesis mods are really annoying. The biggest downside of this build is there are a ton of map mods you cannot run. There are a ton of them. Typically you think more monster life, not a big deal, I can run that. You can't run that on this because it's more monster life, stun immunity. Nothing can be stunned. That ruins your clear. You're basically running around auto attacking everything. You can technically do it, it's just, it feels terrible. So you can't run that. You can't run less recovery because it bricks your leech. You can't run reduce effective auras and stuff for two reasons. Like, I don't run reduce effective auras on any character because it basically turns off your determination. It turns off all your defensive layers, but more so on this build because it also turns off a lot of your accuracy, which can ruin your precise technique. You know, there's so many of them that you just can't run, especially in tandem with how rippy a lot of the Arch Nemesis mods are, where I just like, I nope out, you know, like there's such a crazy amount of them. Even like Ellie Reflect can be bad because your Molten Shell, especially a level 20 Molten Shell, hits so hard. If you go into an Ellie Reflect map and your Molten Shell procs and something hits you, that's gonna chunk the shit out of you. So there's all sorts of stuff, you know. There's all sorts of stuff that you can't run on the build, which makes it annoying. However, most of the meta in hardcore and Arch Nemesis so far, especially with how rewarding Sentinel League is just to run maps white. Fuck it. You chisel it, run it white. Why not? Who cares? So unless you're playing like Seismic or DD, that's how a lot of people are honestly running maps right now. I'm still pretty stubborn and I at least want to transmute them. Like, I want my like 20 to 30 quant, but it does take a lot of rolling in the maps. That's probably the biggest downside. Outside of that, super fun to play, feels really smooth. It's been deleting everything. I want to sort out the gear. Outside of that, the biggest complaint is just it feels a lot like playing an Omni build in the sense that like all my suffixes need to be perfect. I need like 2 of my prefixes to be perfect. So I'm looking for like perfect items for every slot. There's like no wiggle room there. It's like it has to have like 5 of these affixes no matter what, else you don't even look at the item, which can feel a little bit oppressive while clearing. It can be like annoying to get upgrades. That's probably my biggest complaint about the build. Other than that, it's, you know, it's fine. I've been having a lot of fun, and I think that's everything. So I wasn't intending for this to be super long, but there ended up being more to explain than I expected. So it is what it is. We hit another 50-minute. I'm gonna try to wrap up the end real quickly here. As always, I stream on Twitch. As soon as this goes up, I'll be live over on Twitch. If you want to come talk to me, talk about the build, talk about other build diaries, blah, 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 talk about the game, talk about sports. Don't talk to me about sports. I don't watch sports, but anything outside of stuff like that, feel free to stop by the channel. If you've been enjoying the YouTube videos, the consistent uploads and all sorts of stuff like that, please sub, like the video, let me know that you're enjoying the content. If you're not enjoying the content, feel free to leave me a thumbs down and tell me what you think I could do better. Tell me what things you think, like the content, like I'm always open to constructive criticism. Let me know what you think I can do better. Yeah, I think that's everything. Thanks a bunch. I hope you guys are having fun. I know things are kind of shitty right now in PoE, but there's still some fun to be had. Yeah, there will be a video with my thoughts on everything and kind of like what's transpired over the past 2 weeks. That will be coming out either like super late tonight or tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. That's everything. Thanks a bunch, you guys. Twitch, Discord, Twitter, links for all that stuff is down below. Current character POB will be down below as well, as they always are for the build diaries. I always forget to mention that part. And that's it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay safe. Bye, everybody.